Yes, good morning. Good morning to those of you on Zoom.
Good
Good to see
morning.
you all. We have a limited number of people in the room with us today, and many people on Zoom, so I'll try to pay close attention to raised hands and do the right thing. I'd like to call the meeting of the Board of State and Community Corrections to order and begin with our technical help that Adam gives us every time. Oh, we have background music. How about that? I'll remind those of you on Zoom to mute yourselves when you're not ready to speak, or and unmute yourself when Adam calls roll. That's really the most important thing. Adam, you want to go ahead and do your instructions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. We are meeting both in person and virtually, and we will support public participation during this meeting throughout the Zoom webinar platform. Board members, for those participating remotely, if you wish to make a comment, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom or physically raise your hand so we could see you. Members in the room, please remember to state your name before making a comment so that those participating remotely may know who is speaking. Regarding voting, all agenda items that require a vote will require a roll call vote at the end of each agenda item. Board members in the room, please remember to turn off your microphones when you are not speaking, as the microphones are sensitive. And please remember to speak into your microphones so that all on Zoom may hear you. Members of the public, we will give the members of the public the opportunity to comment after the presentation of each agenda item and prior to the board voting on an item. Agenda item 3 is the opportunity for any member of the public to make a comment on any agenda items or other comments in general. You will have 2 minutes for your comment. Members of the public will not have the ability to unmute yourself during discussion until the chair opens it up for public comment. You must raise your hand on Zoom or send a request through public comment at bscc.ca.gov. This is also available on our website. If you are calling by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Dial *6 to unmute yourself. I will call on those who have raised their hands and ask you to unmute yourself. If you raise your hand after we close the queue, your name will be placed in agenda item on the final agenda item for public comments. Your hands will be lowered as soon as I call your name. Public participants in the room, please complete a public comment card by the door and provide it to me during the meeting. As always, we thank you for your patience. Madam Chair, that concludes my instructions.
Thank you, Adam. And I give you a lot of creds for doing that every meeting, every time. It gives everybody else time to settle in. So I appreciate that. I'm going to forego the chair report and look right at our executive director, Katie Howard.
Oh, we haven't yet called the roll, Madam Chair.
We don't do it. It looks like, I thought we were deferring that till, okay. Oh, I think I found an Adam mistake. This is kind of exciting. I thought he was, I go, well, it's not there. Maybe we're doing it later. Adam,
Chair
I hold
Pettit.
you fully responsible for that last Linda error.
My apologies.
No.
Chair Pettit.
Present.
Mr. McCumber.
Present.
Mr. Speed is absent today. Mr. Groudon.
Here.
Mr. Dykes.
Here.
Chavez.
Here.
Mr. Haynes. Here. Ms. Vernon.
Here.
Ms. Guard. Mr. Mills.
Here.
Mr. Budnick and Ms. Zaragoza is absent today. Ms. Kumpion.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Adam. Once again, Katie Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, board members in the room and board members on Zoom. It's great to see everyone. Just a few updates. I'd actually like to start with the issue of how we are conducting our meetings. We have the flexibility based on some of the emergency orders and statutory provisions that were changed in Bagley-Keene, the Bagley-Keene law that governs open meetings for state boards like ours. And in last year's budget, there was an extension to the statutory flexibility that allowed board members on Zoom to participate without providing their location address on the public agenda. And in the traditional Bagley-Keene rules, the board member who's, say, calling in from their home office needs to put their address and make that space available for public participation at the meeting. Obviously, all of this flexibility for teleconferencing has been very beneficial during the pandemic. And there are discussions going on in the legislature. Adam will touch on a bill. We are hoping to see an extension of this flexibility so that board members can participate remotely without having to provide their address and public space. But that remains to be seen. We'll keep you posted, of course. And the flexible statutory change is set to expire at the end of this month. So it's something that's pretty active and we'll keep you posted on that. I also want to mention, I certainly sent an email around to all of the board members, but our management team and Madam Chair had the chance to do a farewell dinner last night to Ricardo Goodridge, our fabulous colleague who was the deputy director in our grants division. And I know all of you had the chance to work with him or certainly see him present. He was our colleague here for, I think, a little over 10 years. He had recently come to the BSCC when Linda came into her role as chair and when I came on board. Just really an exceptional person. He's gone on to, or he actually hasn't started his new position. He'll start next week at a national philanthropic organization providing technical assistance on grant-related, system reform-related things. So obviously stuff in his skill set. So we'll miss him a lot. And I just wanted to give the chance just to offer my thanks publicly to all of the wonderful contributions that Ricardo made here. So I think I'll turn now to provide an update on the status of our juvenile regulations revisions process and specifically zooming in on the secure youth treatment facilities regulations. So a couple of reminders. I'm kind of going to give you a bit of detail here because this is really important. So starting with the first thing is that we have a statutory deadline coming up that we are not going to make. And certainly we are not in the habit of missing statutory deadlines. So we wanted to explain the context for the SYTF regulations development process. SB 823 DJJ realignment passed in 2020, as you know, and then there was a follow-on bill, SB 92, that was enacted in May of 2021 that addressed a lot of issues related to secure youth treatment facilities, which I'll refer to as SYTFs. And in that bill, there was a requirement for the BSCC to review existing juvenile facility standards and modify or add standards for SYTFs. That was supposed to have been completed by July 1, which is in about 2 weeks. The regulations are to be developed with the coordination and concurrence of the Office of Youth and Community Restoration. We anticipate bringing a regulations package to this board not later than February of next year, including the SYTF regs. And I just want to give you a little bit more of the context and the status and why it is taking longer. First off, we believe that a thoughtful, collaborative, and deliberative process with a lot of public and subject matter expert participation is paramount. There were some circumstances that we could not have anticipated that also resulted in further delay. But back in February of 2022, we launched the regs revision process and the process to form an executive steering committee. At the April 2022 board meeting, 2 board member co-chairs were named to lead that effort, Chief Kirk Haynes and Miguel Garcia. And with help from those 2 co-chairs, we put together a very diverse executive steering committee. The members have a broad range of subject matter expertise and both professional and personal experience. The OYCR director, Catherine Lucero, is an ESC member, and she was willing to chair a subcommittee on the SYTF regs. Then a lot of process stuff has been going on. We collected extensive input through a public comment email. We held public listening sessions. We met with probation chiefs and facility managers for structured input. We partnered with community-based organizations and even did some sort of mini grants so that local CBOs could collect input from people with direct system involvement experience to provide suggestions on regulations. And our regulations team also did extensive research into best practices. The first in-person ESC meeting was in November of last year. And there was extensive public comment and participation in that meeting. And we saw that the pace of this work was simply going to require more time. Shortly after that first ESC meeting, board members will recall that Miguel Garcia stepped down from the BSCC and that ESC because he took a new job. Alphabet soup here, but I think we all know these acronyms at the OYCR. And then unfortunately, our second ESC meeting had to be canceled and rescheduled because we had it set for January 10th of this year, and the winter storms were in full flower at that point. So we decided that it was prudent and necessary to postpone the meeting. Then the SYTF subcommittee had a very productive first meeting in early March. And there was a lot of discussion about how to proceed with the SYTF regs, and there was some discussion about the possibility of doing emergency regulations. But for several reasons, we decided against proceeding with emergency regs, including concerns about implementation in the field on short notice. And then there were some legal questions, I think good legal questions about whether this situation meets the definition of an emergency for purposes of the Office of Administrative Law. So bottom line, here we are, mid-June. We're not making that July deadline, and we need to continue this thoughtful collaborative work that's underway. And as I mentioned earlier, we think taking the extra time is necessary and furthermore was unavoidable. So we plan to bring a package to this board not later than February 2024. Our next steps include an SYTF subcommittee at the end of July, and then the full ESC will meet at the end of August. So I'm happy to take any questions that you may have on the juvenile regs work, and certainly ask Chief Haynes if he'd like to add any thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kathleen. And I completely agree with all the things that you talked about, all the impacts to the work that has been done. Really good work, hard work that's been going on. I want to commend Director Lucero and for the subcommittee for the work that they've done on the SYTF regulations. But it's still some work left to do. And you know, we want to make sure that as we've done this work, keep people safe. We want to make sure that we position the full ESC and of course any of the subcommittees to be able to do the work in a way that it's going to be productive and not disruptive because of you know, the situations with weather and all those kind of things. So we just want to make sure that we keep the work moving forward and so that we can certainly hit that deadline in February of 24. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Chief. Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Katie. Looking there, COVID-19 is listed on mine. Are we still doing COVID-19 reports?
No, that
Okay.
we are not doing a
Well, let me
COVID-19
say this at this point. It has to be done because I teased Adam on the record. I must now retract my teasing because I did find the note to tell me to take roll at that juncture. But then again, we found this
Appreciate your
COVID-19
honesty,
issue.
right.
So, I mean, maybe it's even Steven now. Legal update from council.
I have no legal update, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Can hardly mess that up. Any questions or comments from the board? Any members of the public, either virtually or in the room, wish to make a comment?
At this time, I do not have public comment.
Thank you very much. Legislative update, Adam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will give a brief update of the 2023 bills that may impact the BSCC. The summaries are in your reading materials under information item 4 or by clicking on the legislative update on your iPads. As a reminder, we do not take position on any bills. Assembly Bill 268 by Dr. Akila Weber has moved to the Senate, which will add 2 additional members to the 13-member board, a licensed mental health care provider and a mental health care provider appointed by the governor. The bill would also make changes to Title 15 regulations on safety checks, mental health screenings, and STC training standards. AB 280 by Assemblymember Holden would require local detention facilities to develop written procedures on segregated confinement, along with periodically checking on individuals and out-of-cell programming for at least 4 hours a day and other provisions. The BSCC would be required to inspect both private and public facilities for compliance. Assembly Bill 505 by Assemblymember Ting would transfer all authorities, duties, and responsibilities related to juvenile justice from the BSCC to the Office of Youth and Community Restoration. These duties include facilities inspections and the development of and revision of Title 15 and Title 24 regulations. This bill is in the Senate Public Safety Committee. Senate Bill 544 by Senator Laird would continue to allow remote participation in public meetings by board members without noticing their locations to the public. This bill has moved to Assembly Committee on Governmental Organization. By way of background, under current law, July 1, 2023 is the last day for board members to participate remotely without noticing their remote locations to the public on the agenda. Finally, AB 1723 by Assemblymember Waldron would require the BSCC to establish a uniform process to allow a person who has been convicted of a felony and is employed by an organization that provides rehabilitative programming to currently incarcerated individuals to go into a local carceral facility. Other bills of interest are in your board binder under information items. We will continue to keep you posted on bills. The governor has until October 14 to sign or veto bills. I will bring you the 2023 wrap up at the November meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes my legislative update, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions, comments from the board? Any from members of the? Oh, thank you. Thank you, Katie. Supervisor Chavez.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the information in our packet. It's very, very appreciated. I was very interested in the in Assembly Bill 505 from Assemblymember Tang, and I heard what you said about not taking positions on bills. But I do wonder if the authors of the bills review those bills with you for feedback, and in particular, this bill, and also if you could maybe say a little bit about the sponsorship of the bill. Beyond if there's someone beyond Assemblymember
I
Tang.
think there have been conversations and Katie was directly involved. So Katie, you want to?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, good morning, Supervisor Chavez. Yes, when the amendments dropped into AB 505 to make all of these changes that directly pertain to BSCC authority, that was at the end of March. And I did receive a call right away from the Assembly member's office as well as the sponsors. The sponsors on AB 505 are generally speaking the same advocacy organizations who worked in support of CJCJ realignment. And so we had some conversations about the proposed changes. As we are part of the administration, we can offer information and we can talk about concerns, but we don't get ahead of the governor's office. So it was really more of a listening opportunity for us. One of the things we were able to clearly state, however, is that, you know, SB 823 was a very it was a very negotiated bill where a lot of things were considered and then agreements were reached. And it was not as if there wasn't the possibility considered at that time, back in 2020, of having a different state agency do these juvenile justice related things like regulations and inspections and training standards and so forth. But it was a decision made at that time by the administration that the BSCC should retain those responsibilities. And we certainly have heard a lot of concerns being raised by counties, for example, that there's so much change happening right now that it simply would be too soon. So I would certainly want you to know, Supervisor Chavez, that we talk, you know, very directly with the governor's legislative people on these things. And that's probably about as much as I can say. Anything to add, Aaron? Okay. Happy to take any further questions.
Yes, thank you. That is really helpful background. And may I ask, do you know the problem they're trying to solve here? Is it an alignment issue?
Yeah,
Oh,
I think that's primarily what you would hear from the supporters of the bill, that there's sort of an efficiency argument to be made rather than having responsibilities and duties related to juvenile justice facilities in counties being split across two state agencies. Why not put them all together in one?
got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other board members wish to comment? Any members of the public?
I do have one member of the public on Zoom. And that would be Kelio, I'm going to allow you to talk and you will have 2 minutes.
Good morning. I don't know if, can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh, I just had a question about, I heard something about where people who have felonies will be able to go into facilities, to help other people. I didn't really grasp all of it, but I just kind of wanted to know more information about that.
certainly.
Sure, there's a proposal right now at the legislature by Assemblymember Waldron. Right now, existing law provides that people who have been convicted of felonies are not allowed to go on the grounds of a state prison or a jail without consent of the facility administrators. And this current bill as proposed would require the BSCC to develop regulations and processes to allow those types of visits to occur in a standardized fashion.
That's all for public
Okay,
comment.
thank you. Moving on now to the consent items. That's items A through C. Hoping the board's taking a look at that. If anybody on the board would like to pull any of these items or comment on any of these items. Seeing none, are there any members of the public wishing to pull an item or comment on an item?
At this time, Madam Chair, I do not have public comment.
Thank you. We want to adopt the consent agenda. I need a motion in a second.
Move to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. McCumber. Aye. Mr. Groudon,
Aye.
Mr. Dykes,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Yes.
Mr. Haynes,
Aye.
Ms. Vernon,
Aye.
Ms. Guard, Mr. Mills,
Aye.
Ms. Kumpion.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries for consent items.
Thank you. Moving on to action items. Item D. The detention facility inspection update.
Thank you. I think it is morning. Good morning, Madam Chair and board members, those in the room and on Zoom, community members and colleagues. I'm Allison Ganter, Deputy Director with the Facility Standards and Operations Division here at the BSCC. Here to provide an update on the local detention facility inspection so far. You've all received a copy of the updated list of items of non-compliance in both adult and juvenile detention facilities. I'll start with the adult detention facilities. You'll notice, with the exception of one facility, all of the items of non-compliance that have been captured so far this year are in green. They are in pending status. I've spoken with and gotten updates from the field representatives that they are actively working with each of the facilities to correct those items. If you recall, our enhanced inspection process allows 30 days for a corrective action plan and then 60 days from that time to correct the item. So all of those counties are working to correct those issues, and we are not requesting that the board request any of those sheriffs to appear before the board at this time. Moving on to the juvenile items of non-compliance, there is one county with outstanding items of non-compliance in their juvenile halls. That's Kings County Probation. We've been following with them closely. The Welfare and Institutions Code, with respect to suitability, there are some other and more stringent timeframes there. Juvenile halls have 60 days in which to provide a corrective action plan. Kings County's corrective action plan is due next week on June 25th. The field rep is actively providing technical assistance. They will be visiting the facility prior to the date that the corrective action plan needs to be submitted so that they can verify the progress. We're anticipating correction of the items. If not, we anticipate approving that corrective action plan. So we will update you on the progress of that agency at our next meeting. At this time, we're not inviting any chiefs of probation to appear before our board at this time. I'd like to provide 2 updates on pending items that have been discussed recently before the board. One of those is the Los Angeles County Probation Department. As you recall, the 2 juvenile halls, Central Juvenile Hall and Barry J. Nydorf Juvenile Hall, were found unsuitable to detain minors. And we have been informed by the department that both facilities, Central and Barry J. Nydorf, will be vacated sometime in June. The youth will be moved to the Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. We began a pre-opening inspection on June 1st of the Los Padrinos facility. We've been providing active technical assistance both on site and over the phone through Zoom with the agency since that visit. We are going to return to the facility prior to youth occupying that facility to ensure that all of the items related to Title 24 have been corrected, addressed, and that there are no outstanding items of noncompliance with Title 24 when youth occupy that building. And we'll continue to keep this board updated on activities related to suitability and the move of youth to Los Padrinos. And finally, I wanted to provide an update. I know there's been significant interest in Riverside County and the tragic reports of deaths in the facilities in that county. We recently conducted an inspection of the Riverside County detention facilities in the past few weeks, and I wanted to share a few observations that we made while we were there. The agency does have an extensive pre-booking process to screen for substances, both those being brought in and people in active use or withdrawal. I have a hard time saying withdrawal. Sorry. Staff are trained on identifying the signs of use and overdose. All correctional deputies are trained on the use of and carry Narcan on their duty belts. Additionally, the agency has equipped every single housing unit with a case that is equipped with Narcan. When that case is opened, an alarm goes off and medical staff are notified immediately. We're also aware that to date, this calendar year, 70 overdoses have been prevented by staff using Narcan. So we're working on finalizing their inspection report. There were no items of noncompliance with Title 15 identified. Otherwise, you would see those on the list. The only items of noncompliance in the agency are due to crowding issues. So Title 24 issues that our team is working through. So that's the update on inspection reports and a couple of updates on active issues that we're seeing out there. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Allison. Any questions or comments from board members, either in person or virtually? Yeah.
Thank you so much for the report. So did I hear you said there were 70 deployments of Narcan
Correct.
in Riverside? Do you know the period of time?
That was since January 1st up to about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So about 5 months worth of data. And last year, I think there were 150 or so, around 150 last calendar year from.
This is
the
just for
reports.
Riverside?
Correct.
Wow. Thank you.
Supervisor Chavez.
Yes, thank you. Just to ask a follow-up question to that, I apologize that I don't know the answer to this, but how do those report outs happen for each of the county facilities in terms of just that issue relative to drug overdoses as a subject matter?
I'm not quite sure of
I think they want to know if the data on
Oh, those
Narcan,
are, okay, so I apologize. So we don't collect those data through the BSCC. But when we are in inspections and looking at booking, pre-booking, those types of activities, some of those are regulated by Title 15. So those that are applicable to Title 15 and booking, screening, classification, those sorts of things, the county can share any type of data that they choose to share with our inspector at the time. It might not be directly tied to a regulation or a requirement for data collection, but it is pertinent to the booking process that we're looking at during our inspections.
The reason I ask that question is that, you know, the fact of overdoses and the prevention of overdoses does seem to tie into the security and safety of the facility. And so what I'm wondering is, why aren't we then collecting that information from everyone? And as I was just kind of gasping when I heard Riverside's numbers, I realized that I have to ask that same question of my own county, but I wouldn't really know how to compare it in terms of how actions that are being taken do or aren't health protective of the people that are in custody.
well, that's a fair and reasonable comment and concern. And one that I think we had some conversations about when we began to hear this number specifically. We don't have a path forward on this at this juncture, but one that should be considered. That's really where I would have to leave it at this juncture.
If I could, just to offer one more thought, I would be very interested in if staff could give us a formal response on at some point as to whether or not this is an area we can or appropriately probe. And then the other I'll just say is that what it also brought to mind is that in our jail, we just put a Narcan vending machine in it so that people leaving, family members, folks could have access to Narcan, and we're trying, or naloxone, I think is actually technically what we're doing. But again, I don't know if that's a best practice. It would be, but it's something that we're using to respond both to folks who are in custody, but also family members and friends. So I'll look forward to getting some feedback from staff when appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from board members? Yes, Norma.
I had a question. I didn't quite hear what Allison said. Did she say 150 for all of last year and that now it's 70 from January to June? Or did she say at this year, it was 150? Was it
Last year, last year was 150. This is their agency reporting to us at a inspection activities, and then 70 this year so far.
So far. Okay. Thank you.
I see Chief Mills.
Hey, Linda, just to be chair, just to be clear, is this within our purview to analyze and to respond to drug overdoses in a correctional facility?
Well, my initial response to that is no. The analysis of that it's very complicated depending on, whether or not it could be a drug overdose that's avoidable in terms of using the Narcan or not. And there's obviously a complicated subject matter in facilities when there are deaths in custody, but that is not in our purview at this time, although as was to Allison, if we're provided that information, we would capture it and move it forward. I think it's a difficult area to take a deep dive into at this point, based on the authority we have and based on the issues surrounding any death in custody.
I guess for me, Allison mentioned that they were compliant in all areas and there were no discrepancies. And yet I would just be caution us not to overreach in areas that are not the responsibility of the board. I think it's where this is a complex enough job that BSCC has already, and not extend to areas that maybe are not our purview. Now, if it's a matter of if the Riverside Sheriff's Office had come in with multiple discrepancies, one of which was the security of the system, then I think we should be concerned. But that's not what I heard.
Thank you. That's also a good point. And Allison, I would inquire of you myself that this information was offered as a proactive step for
Correct.
safety and security in the facility, and not one that we went in requiring them to provide us.
That is correct. Yeah, they provided that information during our initial inspection activities as our team member was, beginning the inspection and walking through, booking and classification procedures.
And we work very hard because these inspections are complex and expansive to stay in our lane on this. And I think I appreciate you providing us that information at this point. And I think we'd, I suppose, could give some anecdotal report out back to the board in our next hearing. But in terms of really exercising our authority on this issue, it would have to be a voluntary submission by sheriffs that wished us to know what was going on facility by facility. I mean, I have heard of a vending machine being in your county, Supervisor Chavez. So it's, that's very proactive, but yet again, not under our scope. And I see you have your hand up again.
Yeah, thank you. And I do want to just acknowledge that the point that Chief Mills raised is really, really critical in terms of not having scope creep where that's not appropriate. Part of what I was really trying to understand is that even if all the boxes are checked, and by the way, I'm not making a judgment about this particular facility. I'm really grateful they gave us the information, because it actually gives me as a policymaker an opportunity to go back to my own community and say, hey, what are we doing and how are our numbers relative to how many people we have in? But I am interested in understanding when we see trends of significant risk in custody, what, if any, responsibility do we have? And does it tie already? And that's really the question I'm asking. Does it tie already to the strictures that lay out what we're responsible for? That's really what my question is. It's not to engage in scope creep right now. It really is to understand where that line is delineated. And, and obviously overdoses are a significant issue, both in custody and out of custody. And so and I recognize there's a lot of complexity. I really do want to understand from counsel, if he could do an analysis that would help me understand under what terms and conditions does that become an issue for the BSCC, and under what terms and conditions doesn't it? That's all. But I get, Andy, what you're saying.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, and if I might just jump in for one moment, just to provide a little bit of context before Aaron speaks. There are Title 15 regulations in the medical and mental health section that tie into things such as intake, screening, care while in the facility related to substances that the health department inspects for. So our inspection doesn't cover those. So I just wanted to let Supervisor Chavez know that there are regulations that deal with how any substance is addressed in the facility. Those are in other sections of Title 15 regulations, not the section that our team is inspecting for at this time.
Very, very helpful. Thank you.
Counsel.
Yeah, I mean, again, the charge of the board is to establish the minimum standards for correctional facilities and inspect for those standards. So with respect to, any of the areas that potential, the reasons why drugs may be entering a facility, there are things that certainly our standards would touch on, including as Allison already touched on, intake screenings, searches of units of cells and things like that. Those are certainly areas that we have the purview over in terms of our reg making authority. So that's sort of just the general answer of, what, is there something that could be done in this area in terms of rulemaking or reg making? Potentially, it depends on, again, on what the focus might be in terms of, how the board would want to address those issues.
Thank you. There you are, Sheriff. Sheriff Groton.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate what Chief Mills and Supervisor Chavez said. I think, the fentanyl issue is such a huge issue, both in the community and in the jails or the correctional facilities. And the problem is there aren't any easy answers. It's so easy to introduce to our facilities. And, we're all being, I'm just from the interactions with the sheriffs, we're all being very proactive in trying to address the issue. But I do think, so I agree with what everyone else said. I do think there's an area where BSCC can help, and that's with the field reps, passing on best practices, and also in the trainings that we host together between the, State Sheriff's Association and BSCC and so on. But I think we need to be very proactive in trying to pass on, strategies that have worked in some counties to others. But as far as, digging in here, it's really, honestly, we're failing in the community too, in the area of fentanyl. So it'd be really tough to target the jails and have a higher expectation, I think, based on the complexity of the situation. But thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your remarks. I see Sheriff Dykus also has his hand raised.
Yeah, just for Supervisor Chavez, in our packets is an Assembly Bill 519. There are active conversations going on about where that responsibility is going to lie. And once that's clarified, because that bill relates to inmate in custody deaths, that may be something that does fall under the BSCC based on conversations and a few things that are all occurring right now. So that may be kind of a self-fixing prophecy as that moves forward. And there are conversations about that. And that bill is specific to boards of supervisors and oversight over in custody deaths and some of the manners in which they're occurring. So this may be spelled out for us here shortly.
Thank you, Sheriff Dykus, and also Sheriff Groton, really helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate your remarks, and I think, as always, we like to stay in our lane, but these conversations are not falling on deaf ears. I can assure you of that, and that there may be something in the future that addresses this, that the board has some oversight of, but at this juncture, none of that's out there. And but I think the conversation is meaningful. I'm sort of reminded as we do this, the COVID issue, the structure that was built around that was a community and an in custody problem and had to be considered and addressed. This is much like that, an epidemic of fentanyl out there. So I'm sorry, the parallel is not lost on anyone in this room. Okay, any members of the public that wish to
Yes,
speak
I have
on?
two members of the public that wish to speak. And
Thank you, Adam.
The first one would be Avalon. Avalon, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, members of the board. This is Avalon Edwards with Starting Over Inc. based in Riverside County. I continue to be astounded, honestly, that this oversight body feels comfortable claiming that Riverside County is in compliance with your minimum standards when people continue to die in these jails at extremely alarming rates. 18 people died in Riverside County custody in 2022. They were considered in compliance then. Already at least 6 more people have died in Riverside County custody this year, despite the county being under active investigation from the Attorney General's office. How can this amount of loss be in compliance with your agency's standards for safety? Ms. Ganter mentioned that the department is doing thorough inspections to ensure that incarcerated people aren't bringing drugs in at intake. Were members of the Sheriff's Department staff held to the same level of scrutiny as people in these facilities? And that's a genuine question that I'd like to hear Ms. Ganter respond to. because incarcerated people and their loved ones are subject to frequent, cruel, and invasive searches on a regular basis in Riverside County facilities to prevent the flow of drugs inside. Yet the role of jail staff in bringing in fatal drugs to these facilities continues to go ignored. In addition, how is the jail staff meeting safety check requirements outlined by title regulations when people have been left dead in their cells for up to an hour before being discovered by jail staff in Riverside County? That is objectively true. Jail staff were not doing safety checks frequently enough to find somebody's dead body. And I'm sorry, I get emotional talking about this because these are minimum standards. This is supposed to be the bare minimum, and you are coming to these meetings giving Riverside County a rubber stamp saying that they're completely in compliance when people's deaths are evidence that they are not. How were 2 people killed last year, including a trans woman, by cellmates with histories of violent outbursts? How is that not the responsibility of the Sheriff's Department? And how is it not the responsibility of this oversight body?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Brian Goldstein. You have 2 minutes.
Brian?
Good morning, Brian Goldstein with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. We think that drug overdoses in a facility are the purview of BSCC, both in terms of facility regulations and technical assistance. We hope this agency will take that responsibility seriously. We saw the consequences for inaction in LA County. And if the BSCC cannot address this, where should the public turn? Specific to the inspection reports, we're very concerned about the issues in Kings County. Youth on suicide watch are placed in a holding room and wear a suicide safety smock, which is not the least invasive approach. Youth are in holding rooms for 2 days, not receiving programming. There's a lack of safety checks and inconsistent documentation on the use of force. For the BSCC staff, we ask, how did the agency learn about these issues? What is the field inspector doing to address them? And are youth still being subject to these failures? Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no more public comments.
Thank you, Adam. Back to the board. Any further questions, comments? Ms. Ganter?
At this time, we do not have a recommendation for the board to request any of the sheriffs or chiefs to appear at this time.
Thank you. This was a discussion item. It requires no vote. I appreciate everybody's input. I think it was a good discussion, and I think it's a process that is evolving. I will leave it at that. At this point, we are at the part of the agenda where any public comment may be made on any item, whether it is on or off the agenda. Adam, do you have any members of the public that would like to speak at this point?
Right now, I only have 1 member of the public who wishes to speak.
Thank you. Go forward.
Okay. So I'll call on Yusef Miller. Yusef, you have 2 minutes and go ahead and talk.
This is Yusef Miller from the North County Equity and Justice Coalition Saving Lives in Custody campaign. And I agree with the previous speakers. How can jails be incompliant when we have people dying? I'm in San Diego County. We're at 6 deaths so far. And we also went from San Diego County to LA County where they had 19 so far. And Riverside County has 6 so far. And we're talking about people are in compliance. The grand jury of San Diego also put out that we've been saying for years that San Diego Sheriff's Department needs to scan the deputies and the staff just to be 100% to make sure that there are no drugs coming in. And it is rejected in San Diego County. And the grand jury of San Diego County also thought that was a good idea. Now, that idea has been floating around in Arizona. They're doing that. In different parts of California, they're also doing it. San Diego County refuses. So we're saying that these places are in compliance when people are losing their lives. People, lost loved ones are piling up, organizing and rallying together for loss of life for neglect. These people have been neglected to death Yet San Diego and California board says that we are in compliance. This is wrong. This should not be, and we should take a more proactive and involved step in solving this issue. The communities and the organizations have some solutions. Please open up and allow us to address those and get involved in helping you end in custody deaths. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no more public comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Shockingly, we're at the end of the agenda and I appreciate everybody's participation today. There are a couple of quick announcements, and one is we historically do a July meeting if there is specific budget issues or, legislation that would have to be addressed in a very timely fashion. We are not in that position this year, and therefore we'll be canceling the July meeting. So please take that off your calendars and make the best of that day as you can. The September meeting is set for Palm Springs this year. We've had some really helpful cooperation and suggestions from our own Chief Mills, who is in Palm Springs. I'm super hopeful all of you can make it for that meeting there. Also, there is prospective meeting dates for 2024 that should be coming to you soon. And please let us know if it causes you any grief or you cannot make any of those meetings, and we can adjust at this point much easier than we can at the last minute. With that said, looking at no one's hands raised, and yes, Chief, oh no, just don't ever touch your glasses at the end of a meeting. It's really unheard of. Thank you all for your participation, and we hope to see you soon.